Many philosophy textbooks are both excellent and accessible, yet most of them omit mentioning characteristics which a great many of the figures covered within them shared. These shared characteristics, moreover, are ones which would make these figures suspicious to many students today. It is not intended that these figures be judged for having these characteristics, but that we may more honestly understand the teachings of these figures, including the contexts in which they were given. First, many of the figures covered in our textbooks were men of elite status. Some were born into privilege, while others rose up into positions of influence. Some examples of the former are as follows. Plato was born into a ruling family of Athens. The father of Aristotle was a physician to Macedonian royalty, and Descartes was able to attend all the prominent universities of Europe on account of his family. Some examples of those who rose up into a position of influence are as follows. Augustine was a respected rhetorician in his day. David Hume became a popular socialite. While in Prussia, Hegel's name became widely proclaimed. Second, many of the figures covered in our textbooks either opposed democracy directly or endorsed a political philosophy contrary to democracy. Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle all held democracy to be one of the worst forms of political rule. The Stoics and the Christian monks, whom followed, were passive in the face of imperial or aristocratic rule. Hobbes deemed an absolute monarchy to be the best form of political rule. The words of Hegel were often interpreted as supportive of the authoritarian Prussian state. And third, many of the figures covered in our textbooks either avoided or abandoned women. Since Socrates and Plato, many philosophers have considered the married life to be a social necessity, but one inferior to the life of study and contemplation. And some have gone further and accused sexual intercourse as being an unnecessary pleasure, and this pleasure they often associate with the body, and conclude that sexual intercourse ought to be avoided on account of the pain it subsequently causes and the distractions it presents to the life of study and contemplation. All to say that these philosophers did not consider a romantic relationship with a woman to be that much of a priority. And therefore, many of the philosophers remained unmarried throughout their life. Others, like Socrates, it is reported, neglected both wife and children, while others, like Augustine, actually abandoned the woman whom he was with at the time in order to pursue the life of study and contemplation. In conclusion, there are some characteristics which many of the philosophers happen to share, which incidentally many of our excellent philosophy textbooks fail to mention. We've covered 3 of these similarities. First, there was the elite status and the masculinity. Second was the opposition to democracy. And third is the avoiding or abandoning of women by many of the philosophers we will cover. This has been a disclaimer to what will follow.